A sprawling penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the entire New York City skyline. A closet bursting with haute couture from designers like Chanel and Dior. A loving billionaire husband who worshipped the ground she walked on, and their first child, a son growing safely inside her. Audrey Davenport was living a dream, the kind of life girls read about in fairy tales. But in the space of a single evening, the gilded pages of her story were ripped out and set on fire. The dream became a nightmare, leaving her 7 months pregnant, homeless, and discarded like yesterday's trash. Her husband, however, in his arrogant climb to the top, made one fatal miscalculation. He forgot that while Audrey was his wife, she was also Walter Harrington's daughter. And Walter Harrington was a man who did not just close doors. He demolished the entire building. The air in the Davenport penthouse was always chilled to a precise 68 degrees, a climate-controlled perfection that mirrored the life Connor Davenport had meticulously constructed. Everything had its place. The abstract expressionist paintings on the stark white walls, the minimalist Italian furniture arranged with geometric precision, and his wife Audrey, the most beautiful acquisition of all. Audrey traced the rim of her chamomile tea mug, the warmth a small comfort against the impersonal cool of the marble kitchen island. At 7 months pregnant, she felt a profound sense of nesting, a desire for warmth and softness that seemed at odds with their home's aesthetic. She'd tried to introduce a plush rug into the living room, once a deep shag carpet in a warm cream color. Connor had it removed the next day, stating it disrupted the clean lines of the space. "You're thinking too loud again." Connor's voice, smooth as polished granite, cut through her thoughts. He walked in already dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford suit, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. He kissed the top of her head, a gesture that felt more like a branding than an act of affection. "Just thinking about the nursery," she said, forcing a bright smile. "I was looking at some wallpaper samples online. Little hot air balloons." Connor glanced at his Patek Philippe watch. "Darling, we have a designer for that. Just approve her final selection. I trust her taste implicitly." He paused. "Remember the Harrington Foundation Gala tonight? The car will be here at 7 sharp. Don't be late. The Harrington Foundation. Her family's foundation." The irony was not lost on her. Since their marriage 2 years ago, Connor had seamlessly woven himself into the fabric of her family's legacy. He sat on the board of the foundation. His tech company, Nexus Dynamics, had secured massive infrastructure contracts with her father's multinational conglomerate, and he was the darling of the society pages, always with his lovely wife, Audrey Harrington Davenport, by his side. Her father, Walter Harrington, had been skeptical at first. He was old money, a titan of industry, who had built his empire on steel logistics and ruthless intuition. He saw Connor, the flashy tech billionaire, who'd made his fortune on an app, as a peacock, all feathers and noise. Men who need to show you how rich they are. Audrey Walter had warned her gently before the wedding, are often the poorest in character. But Audrey had been in love. Connor had swept her off her feet with grand gestures and intense focus. He'd made her feel like the only person in the world. She'd defended him, assured her father that his ambition was just passion. His control was just attention to detail. And eventually Walter had relented, wanting only his daughter's happiness. That evening, as Audrey had her hair and makeup professionally done for the gala, she felt a familiar pang of loneliness. Connor was in his home office on a conference call. He was always on a call, always closing a deal, always scaling the next peak. She was a part of the scenery of his success. She chose a deep sapphire gown of flowing silk that accommodated her baby bump gracefully. When she walked out, Connor was just ending his call. He looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Perfect," he said, his approval clinical. "The color complements your eyes. Let's go. We need to make an entrance." At the gala, they were a portrait of perfection. Connor was charismatic, shaking hands, laughing with board members, his hand always possessively on the small of Audrey's back. She played her part, smiling, making small talk about the nursery, accepting congratulations on the baby. But she watched him work the room and saw the hunger in his eyes. He wasn't connecting with people. He was assessing their value, their utility. Later that night, as their car glided through the silent, rain-swept streets of Manhattan, Audrey decided to try again. "I was thinking," she began softly, "maybe we could take a baby moon. Just a week, somewhere quiet. No phones, no meetings, just us. Before the baby comes." Connor didn't look at her. He was scrolling through market reports on his phone, the screen's harsh light illuminating the hard set of his jaw. "Audrey, I'm in the middle of a hostile takeover of Omnicorp. The next 2 months are critical. There's no time for a vacation." "But this is important too," she whispered, her hand instinctively going to her belly. He finally turned to her, his expression one of weary impatience. "Everything will be here when the deal is done. We can go anywhere in the world. We have our whole lives for vacations. Right now I need to focus. I need you to understand that." His tone was final. The conversation was over. Audrey looked out the window, watching the city lights blur through the raindrops on the glass. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the dawning, terrifying realization that she was living in a beautiful, exquisitely designed cage, and the man she loved was not her partner, but her keeper. The baby kicked a small, insistent flutter, a reminder of the life that depended on her. And for the first time she wondered if this perfect life was a beautiful lie, and what would happen when the truth finally decided to break through the glass. The breaking point didn't arrive with a thunderous crash, but with the quiet, insidious chime of a text message. It was 2 weeks after the gala. Connor had become even more distant, spending long nights at the office, his explanations clipped and his patience non-existent. Audrey's anxieties were a low hum beneath the surface of her days, a feeling she tried to soothe by organizing baby clothes and reading parenting books. That night, Connor was supposedly in a late-night negotiation. Audrey was in bed, propped up by pillows, trying to read when his phone, left charging on his nightstand, lit up. It was a name she didn't recognize: Bianca. The message preview was stark and brutal. "Still thinking about last night. Your wife has no idea what you're really like. Her loss, my gain." The air left Audrey's lungs in a painful rush. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her trembling hand. With a surge of desperate, sickening courage, she unlocked it. His password was ridiculously the date his company went public. There it was, a thread of messages stretching back for months. Explicit photos, plans for secret rendezvous, cruel jokes made at Audrey's expense. They called her the Harrington heiress and the Golden Goose. Bianca Lawson. Audrey recognized the name now. A shark-like vice president from a rival tech firm known for her aggressive tactics and ruthless ambition. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just an affair. It was a merger of ambition. She felt the baby kick a sharp, panicked thump, as if he could sense his mother's world collapsing. A cold, terrifying calm settled over her. She took screenshots of everything, her fingers moving with a mechanical precision she didn't know she possessed, and emailed them to a new secret account she created on the spot. The front door clicked open. Connor was home. She was sitting on the edge of the bed when he walked into the bedroom, loosening his tie. He stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with manufactured concern. She held up his phone. "Bianca," she said, her own voice, a stranger's, hollow and brittle. "She seems to be enjoying your late-night negotiations." The mask of the doting husband fell away. It didn't crumble. It vanished, revealing the cold, reptilian truth of the man beneath. There was no remorse in his eyes, no shame. There was only annoyance, as if she were a minor inconvenience. "Don't be so dramatic, Audrey," he sighed, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "These things happen. We can be adult about this." "Adult about this?" Her voice cracked, a tremor of hysteria rising. "You have been sleeping with this woman for months. You've been laughing about me behind my back. I am carrying your son, and you will be very well compensated for it," he said, his voice dropping to a chillingly calm, businesslike tone. "Look, this marriage has run its course. It was..." beneficial for a time. But Bianca and I are a better fit. We're aligned. We want the same things. Beneficial. The word was a slap in the face. I thought you loved me. He actually laughed, a short, ugly sound. I loved your name. I loved the doors your father could open. And he did. My debt is paid. Nexus Dynamics is a global power now. I don't need the Harrington name to prop me up anymore. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Every shared memory, every whispered promise was a calculated move in his long game. She had been a stepping stone and he was now ready to step off. I want a divorce, he said, walking over to his closet. He began pulling out a suitcase. Get out, Audrey whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. This is my home too. You get out. He turned a look of pitying contempt on his face. Oh, Audrey, you still don't get it. You have nothing. Your name is on the lease, yes. But who pays for it? Who paid for the clothes on your back, the food you eat, the doctors who care for my son? He gestured around the vast, empty-feeling room. This is all mine. I built this. You were just living in it. He made a call. Yes, it's me. It's time. Have them come up. Within 10 minutes, 2 large men in dark suits were at their door. They were his personal security team. They looked at Audrey with impassive eyes. What are they doing here? She cried, stumbling back. They're here to escort you out, Connor said calmly, continuing to pack. My lawyer will be in touch with yours tomorrow to discuss the terms of the settlement. It will be generous provided you don't make a scene. A scene, she shrieked, a raw, primal sound of betrayal. You are throwing your pregnant wife out onto the street and you don't want a scene. Pack a bag, Mrs. Davenport, one of the guards said, his voice devoid of emotion. Or we can remove you without one. Panic, cold, and absolute seized her. They were serious. She grabbed her purse and the first small overnight bag she could find, stuffing it with a few toiletries and a change of clothes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely zip it. Connor didn't even look at her. He was on his phone again, probably arranging for Bianca to move in. The guards led her to the private elevator, their presence a suffocating wall of intimidation. As the doors slid shut, she looked back one last time at the life she thought was hers. Connor was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, a silhouette of success and heartless ambition. He didn't wave. He didn't say goodbye. He simply watched her go, then turned back to his new life. The elevator descended 30 floors in silence. The lobby was empty, the doorman studiously looking away. The security guards walked her to the massive glass doors and opened one. The cold, damp November air hit her like a physical blow. Rain was still falling, a miserable, persistent drizzle. Good night, ma'am, the guard said, and the door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, Audrey Davenport was standing on a rain-slicked Park Avenue sidewalk, 7 months pregnant, with a small bag, the contents of her purse, and the shattered ruins of her life. The city lights glittered mockingly. Cars hissed by their occupants, oblivious to the woman who had just fallen from the sky. She had never felt so alone, so erased in her entire life. The first hour was a blur of shock and adrenaline. Audrey hailed a cab, the driver giving her a concerned look, and asked to go to the only place she could think of, the West Village apartment of her best friend Leah. Leah was a painter, her life a chaotic, colorful, and loving mess, the absolute antithesis of Audrey's former sterile existence. Leah opened the door in paint-splattered overalls, her warm, kind face immediately creasing with worry at the sight of Audrey's tear-streaked, pale face. Audrey. Oh my God, what happened? Come in, come in. Inside the cozy, cluttered apartment that smelled of turpentine and fresh coffee, the story tumbled out in a torrent of sobs and broken sentences. Leah listened, her expression hardening from concern to pure incandescent rage. She wrapped Audrey in the blanket, made her tea she couldn't drink, and held her hand while she cried until she was empty. That monster Leah seethed, pacing the small living room. That soulless, gold-digging monster. I never trusted him. He always looked at you like you were a prize he'd won at a carnival. Audrey spent a sleepless night on Leah's lumpy but welcoming sofa, the baby restless inside her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Connor's cold, dismissive face. She saw the text messages. She felt the chill of the rain on the sidewalk. By morning, the grief had begun to curdle into a hard knot of fear in her stomach. What was she going to do? She had no access to her bank accounts. They were all joint accounts with Connor, and she knew he would have already locked her out. The credit cards in her wallet were in his name. She was for all intents and purposes destitute. "You have to call your father," Leah said gently, placing a plate of toast in front of her. Audrey recoiled. "No, I can't. He was right all along. I'll feel like such a fool. The shame of it, Leah." "Audrey, listen to me," Leah said, her voice firm. "Pride is a luxury you cannot afford right now. You have a baby to think about. This isn't about being right or wrong anymore. This is about survival. Your father loves you. He will be angry, yes, but he will be angry for you, not at you." Leah was right. With trembling hands, Audrey dialed the private number for her father's office. His personal assistant, a woman named Joyce, who had been with him for 30 years, answered. "Joyce, it's Audrey. I need to speak with him. Is he available?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Audrey, dear, of course. He's in a board meeting, but he'll always take your call." "One moment." The line went quiet. Audrey's heart hammered against her ribs. She could already imagine her father's disappointment, the weight of his, "I told you so." Then his voice came on the line, deep and resonant. "Audrey, is everything all right? You sound upset. That was all it took." The dam of her composure broke completely. "Daddy!" She sobbed, the childhood name slipping out. "It's Connor. It's all been a lie." She told him everything. The affair with Bianca Lawson, the cruel words, the way he'd thrown her out with nothing, the security guards being left on the street. She didn't spare a single humiliating detail. On the other end of the line, Walter Harrington was utterly silent. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He simply absorbed every word. When she finished, the silence stretched for a long moment, but it wasn't a silence of judgment. It was the calm before a storm. A Category 5 hurricane. When he finally spoke, his voice was terrifyingly quiet, stripped of all emotion, which was far more frightening than if he had been yelling. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "I'm at Leah's place, in the West Village. Stay there. Do not move. Do not contact him. Do not answer any calls from any number you don't recognize. A car will be there for you in 20 minutes to bring you to the house. Joyce will arrange for a doctor to meet you there to make sure you and the baby are all right." "Dad, I'm so sorry," she began. "You have nothing to be sorry for." He cut her off, and for the first time a sliver of cold, hard fury entered his tone. "You loved a man you thought was worthy. The failure is his, not yours. I am the one who is sorry. I am sorry I ever let that parasite into our family. I am sorry I let him hurt you." He took a deep breath. "Audrey, listen to me very carefully. This is no longer your problem. It is now mine. You are to focus on one thing and one thing only, your health and the health of my grandchild. Let me handle Connor Davenport." "What are you going to do?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. A long pause. "Your husband Walter," said, the words tasting like poison, was so focused on building his empire on my foundations that he forgot one simple rule of construction. The man who provides the foundation can also trigger the demolition. With that, he hung up. Audrey sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was now joined by something else. A sense of awe at the controlled absolute power she had just unleashed. She had been a pawn in Connor's game, but she had just called the king, and the king was about to wipe the entire board clean. Walter Harrington did not rage. He did not shout. He operated with the silent, devastating efficiency of a glacier carving through a mountain. After hanging up with Audrey, he sat motionless in his leather chair high in the Harrington Tower for precisely 1 minute, his hands steepled in front of him. Then he began to move. His first call was to Robert Chen, the head of the commercial banking division at United Metropolitan Bank, a man Walter had known and golfed with for 40 years. Robert Walter's voice was placid. Walter Harrington. I trust you're well. Walter. Always good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I have a sensitive time-critical request. Nexus Dynamics. Connor Davenport. I need you to call their line of credit, all of it. Effective immediately. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Walter. That's a 9-figure credit line. They're in the middle of the Omnicorp acquisition. Calling it in now would cripple them. It would trigger covenants on their other loans. It would be catastrophic. I am aware of the consequences, Robert Walter said, his voice as cold as a tomb. Harrington Industries holds over $10 billion in assets with your bank. We are your largest client. I am calling in a favor. Consider this a test of our long-standing and until now mutually beneficial relationship. The threat was unspoken but crystal clear. Robert Chen knew a command when he heard one. I understand, Walter. I'll make the necessary arrangements. See that you do. Immediately. Walter hung up. His next call was to the 3 private equity firms that had invested heavily in Nexus Dynamics in its early stages. In each call, his message was simple. He recounted in brief but brutal terms how Connor Davenport had used his daughter and his family name to secure their initial trust and investment. He made it clear that the Harrington name was now permanently and irrevocably disassociated from Connor Davenport. I will be liquidating all Harrington holdings that are in any way affiliated with your funds if you continue to back him, he told the CEO of the largest fund. Your allegiance to him will be interpreted as a direct move against me. I suggest you choose wisely. The third set of calls went to the board members of Omnicorp, the company Connor was attempting to take over. Most of these men were Walter's contemporaries, dinosaurs of industry, who, like him, had been wary of the flashy tech upstart. He is a man of no character, Walter stated plainly. He has committed an unforgivable act against my family. His business practices, I can now assure you, are as bankrupt as his morals. Backing out of this deal would be the wisest decision you make this decade. While Walter was surgically dismantling Connor's financial and professional world from the top down, he also dispatched his legal team, a veritable army of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in New York, led by a man named Samuel Peterson. Samuel Walter instructed, I want you to find every contract, every agreement, every document that ties Nexus Dynamics to Harrington Industries. I want you to invoke every penalty clause, every exit provision, every loophole. The infrastructure contracts we gave him, terminate them. Cite breach of ethical conduct. I want to sever every tie so completely that it will be as if he never existed in our world. And find me the prenuptial agreement Audrey signed. I want you to tear it to shreds. Connor Davenport was in a celebratory meeting with Bianca Lawson and his executive team, champagne on ice, ready to toast the final push on the Omnicorp deal. His phone buzzed. It was his CFO, David Chen. Not now, David, we're about to pop the cork. Connor, you need to take this call. David's voice was tight with panic. United Metropolitan just called our entire credit line. All of it. They want 9 figures in our account by end of business tomorrow or they're seizing assets. Connor's smile froze. What? That's impossible. It's a revolving line. They can't just... They did. And I just got a margin call from Goldman Sachs. Our stock has plummeted 12% in the last 30 minutes. Something is happening. Another call beeped through. It was the CEO of one of his primary investment funds. Connor took it, a knot of ice forming in his gut. What the hell did you do to Walter Harrington? The man screamed through the phone. He just called me. He's pulling everything out. We're dumping our stock, Connor. We're done. You're radioactive. One by one, the calls came in. It was a deluge of perfectly coordinated assault. Omnicorp officially rejected his takeover bid. His key suppliers, who also supplied Harrington Industries, suddenly terminated their contracts citing unforeseen circumstances. His stock was in freefall as the big funds publicly announced their divestment. Bianca watched her confident smirk slowly melting into a mask of disbelief and horror. The empire she had hitched her wagon to was collapsing in real time. "What is going on?" she demanded. Connor stood in the middle of his glass-walled office, the glittering city spread out below him, and finally understood. The foundation. The man who provides the foundation can also trigger the demolition. He hadn't just divorced Audrey, he had declared war on Walter Harrington. And in his arrogance, he had shown up to a nuclear war armed with a pocket knife. "It's her father," he whispered, the blood draining from his face. "It's Walter." His CFO ran back in his face, ashen. "Connor, it's worse than we thought. The Harrington contracts, they're all terminated. The penalty clauses alone will bankrupt us. We're finished. The company is built on a house of cards and someone just pulled out the bottom one." Connor looked around at his opulent office, at the panicked faces of his team, at Bianca, who was already inching towards the door, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal, looking for an escape. He had been so proud of his success, believing he had built it all himself. But it was an illusion. Walter Harrington had been the silent architect of his rise, letting him play in a sandbox built with Harrington steel, funded by Harrington connections and legitimized by the Harrington name. And now the architect had taken his blueprints and set them on fire. The collapse of Nexus Dynamics was not a slow decline. It was a detonation. By the next morning, the story was all over the financial news. Nexus Dynamics in freefall amidst rumors of Harrington feud. The stock, once the darling of Wall Street, was now toxic. Every investor, every partner, every client was scrambling to distance themselves from the wreckage. Connor spent a frantic 48 hours in a whirlwind of desperation. He tried calling his contacts at the banks, the private equity firms, the boardrooms. Doors that had once flown open for him were now slammed shut. Calls went unanswered. The few people who did speak to him were curt and dismissive. The message was the same everywhere he turned. "You crossed Walter Harrington. You're on your own." He sat in his penthouse, the same rooms where he had so coldly dismissed Audrey, now feeling like a tomb. The silence was deafening. Even the city outside seemed to have turned against him, its endless energy a mockery of his own sudden inertia. Bianca Lawson, the woman for whom he had torpedoed his life, was the first rat to leap from the sinking ship. "I can't be associated with this, Connor," she said, her suitcases already packed and standing by the door. She wore a look not of concern or sympathy, but of pure, unadulterated self-preservation. "You can't just leave," he yelled, a desperate edge to his voice. "We were a team. We were aligned. She corrected him, her voice like ice chips. "We were aligned when you were the brilliant billionaire about to conquer the world. I am not aligned with a failed CEO about to be sued into oblivion. My career will be destroyed if I stay here. I have to think of myself." "You're just like him," he spat, the accusation bitter. "All you care about is money and power." She gave a thin, cruel smile. "Of course. That's what I found so attractive about you. Don't try to take the moral high ground now, Connor. It doesn't suit you." She wheeled her suitcases to the door. "Goodbye. I'd wish you luck, but let's be honest. You're going to need a miracle, and I don't believe in them." And she was gone. The click of the door was a sound of absolute finality. He was alone, abandoned by the woman who he thought was his partner in ambition. His legal team, a high-priced group of sharks he'd always kept on retainer, was the next to go. Their final act was to deliver the news from Audrey's new lawyer, the legendary Samuel Peterson. "They're not just divorcing you, Connor," his lead counsel explained, already packing his briefcase. "They're coming after you for everything. They've invoked a moral turpitude clause in the prenuptial agreement." Connor scoffed. "That prenup is ironclad. She gets a one-time payout. Nothing more." Apparently not, the lawyer said, avoiding his eyes. "Peterson found a subclause number 27B, something your previous lawyer must have thought was boilerplate." It states that in the event of gross personal misconduct resulting in public humiliation or emotional endangerment to the Harrington family, the entire agreement is rendered null and void, and they get to define what constitutes misconduct. Connor felt the floor drop out from under him. What does that mean? It means the prenup is worthless. She's entitled to half of everything you earned during the marriage. And since nearly all of your wealth was generated in the last 2 years, she's entitled to half of Nexus Dynamics. The company is worthless, Connor screamed. Not entirely, the lawyer said grimly. It still has patents, intellectual property, real estate. They're not going to let it go bankrupt. They're going to pick the carcass clean, and Audrey, or rather her father, will own half of the bones. Our retainer has not been paid, Connor. We can no longer represent you. They left. He was alone with the news that the woman he had thrown out with nothing was now legally entitled to half of his shattered kingdom. The ultimate humiliation came a week later. Eviction notices were posted on the door of the penthouse. The lease was being terminated. The bank had seized the asset. The art on the walls, the designer furniture, the life he had built it, was all being liquidated. He was given 24 hours to remove his personal belongings. As he was throwing clothes into a cheap duffel bag, a new set of security guards, these ones hired by the bank, watched his every move. He saw a flicker of movement by the door and looked up. It was the doorman from the lobby, the one who had looked away when Audrey was thrown out. He was watching Connor now, a small, knowing smirk on his face. In that moment, Connor understood the totality of his fall. He had lost not just his money and his company, but his status, his power, and the one thing he had valued most, the fear and respect of others. Now all he saw in their eyes was contempt. Karma had come for him, and it was far more brutal and efficient than he could have ever imagined. While Connor's world was imploding, Audrey's was being quietly and carefully rebuilt. The car her father sent had brought her not to his formal city residence, but to the sprawling Harrington country estate in Connecticut, a place of warm memories, rolling hills, and the scent of wood smoke and old books. The first few days were a cocoon of care. Her father's personal physician checked on her, and the baby reassuring her that despite the stress they were both healthy. Joyce, her father's assistant, had arranged for her entire wardrobe to be retrieved from the penthouse, along with any personal items of sentimental value. A team had gone in under the supervision of Walter's security and stripped the apartment of anything that belonged to Audrey before the bank could seal it. Her father was a constant, steady presence. He didn't press her to talk about what happened. He simply sat with her in the evenings by the fire, talking about art or politics, or telling her stories about when she was a little girl. He was giving her space to heal, to breathe again. But Audrey knew she couldn't hide away forever. The initial shock had given way to a deep, hollow grief, which was in turn being replaced by a slow-burning anger. It wasn't just anger at Connor, but at herself. Anger for being so blind, so naive, for allowing her own identity to be subsumed by his. One evening she found her father in his study, a cavernous room lined with thousands of books. He was looking over a thick file. "That's the legal case against Connor," he said, without looking up, as if sensing her question. "I don't want his money," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I don't want anything from him." Walter finally looked up, his gaze soft but firm. "This isn't about money, Audrey. It's about justice. He built his entire career on a foundation of deceit, using our family as his primary resource. He treated you not as a wife, but as an asset to be leveraged and then discarded. There must be consequences for that. This is not for him. This is for you. It's to ensure he can never, ever harm you or your child again." He closed the file. "Samuel Peterson has done excellent work. You are now the primary creditor and a 50% shareholder in what remains of Nexus Dynamics. We will restructure it, sell off the valuable patents, and place the proceeds into a trust for your son. Connor will walk away with nothing but his debts and his reputation in ashes." Audrey absorbed this, a grim satisfaction settling within her. But she knew it wasn't enough. Taking his money was her father's way of fighting. She needed her own. "I want to do something," she said. "Something for myself. Something that is just mine." A slow smile spread across Walter's face. "I was hoping you'd say that." Audrey had always had a passion for art, specifically for supporting emerging artists who struggled to find gallery representation. It was a passion Connor had dismissed as a cute hobby. Now she saw it as a path forward. With her father's backing and business acumen to guide her, she began to work. She spent her days on the phone, not with lawyers, but with artists, with real estate agents, with curators. She wasn't the broken, discarded woman anymore. She was Audrey Harrington, and she was building something. She found a beautiful, light-filled space in the Chelsea Arts District. She used her own money from a trust her grandfather had left her untouched during her marriage. She wanted this to be separate from the divorce, separate from Connor's tainted wealth. The project gave her a purpose beyond the pain. It was a place to channel her energy to create something positive from the wreckage. Leah was her first partner, her eye for talent proving invaluable. They called the gallery Phoenix, a name that felt deeply personal, rising from the ashes. As her due date approached, the gallery was taking shape. The walls were painted, the lighting installed. Her life was also taking a new shape. She was no longer just Connor Davenport's wife or Walter Harrington's daughter. She was a mother-to-be, a business owner, a survivor. One afternoon, Samuel Peterson, her lawyer, came to the estate to have her sign the final divorce papers. They were sitting in the sunroom overlooking the gardens. "It's done," Samuel said, his tone gentle. He fought, of course, tried to hide assets, tried to declare bankruptcy to avoid the settlement. "But your father's forensic accountants found everything. He has nothing left." Audrey took the pen and signed her name, Audrey Harrington, with a firm, steady hand. There was no sadness, no hesitation. It felt like closing the final chapter of a terrible book. "There is one more thing," Samuel said, pulling another document from his briefcase. "During our discovery, we found something." Connor was sloppy. He had a secret fund, an offshore account where he was siphoning money from Nexus Dynamics. But he'd also been siphoning money from a joint investment account that was set up as a wedding present from your father. Essentially, he wasn't just a cheat in his marriage. He was stealing from you from the very beginning. He slid the paper across the table. It was a wire transfer confirmation. He was moving millions of their joint funds into his secret account just 3 months after their wedding day. The lie was deeper and darker than she had ever imagined. Any lingering flicker of pity she might have felt for Connor was extinguished in that moment. He had never been her husband. He had been a predator, and she his prey. Signing the papers wasn't an ending. It was an emancipation. She was free. And she was building a new foundation, one made not of glass and steel and lies, but of her own strength, her own passion, and the fierce protective love she already felt for the son who was about to enter her world. The first month of Nicholas's life passed in a blissful, sleep-deprived haze of love. The world for Audrey had shrunk to the size of her son's tiny, grasping hand, his milky size, and the incredible, overwhelming weight of his head on her shoulder. Her new home, a classic brownstone on a tree-lined street that her father had insisted on buying for them, was the antithesis of the penthouse. It was a house that invited life, not a museum that repelled it. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the lived-in wooden floors. The air smelled of baby powder, fresh flowers, and the coffee that was her constant companion. It was a home filled with warmth, a sanctuary she had built on the foundations of her own resilience. The Phoenix Gallery was nearing its grand opening, and the excitement was a pleasant thrum beneath the surface of her new maternal reality. She would take calls with artists and contractors while Nicholas napped on her chest, his rhythmic breathing a soothing counterpoint to the busy logistics of launching a business. She was tired. She was overwhelmed, but she was profoundly, deeply happy. The woman who had been escorted out into the rain felt like a character from someone else's tragic novel. She was in the nursery, a soft, serene room painted in pale shades of gray and yellow, rocking Nicholas after his afternoon feeding. He was just drifting off his little mouth, making soft sucking motions in his sleep. A sense of peace so complete it was almost tangible settled over her. This was real. This love, this quiet moment, this life she was creating for her son. This was the wealth that truly mattered. The soft chime of the house intercom cut through the silence. She gently placed Nicholas in his crib, tucking a soft blanket around him before walking over to the wall panel. "Yes, Frank," she said quietly, her eyes still on her sleeping son. Frank, the head of her new security detail, was a calm and stoic man whose presence was more reassuring than intimidating. His voice, however, held a note of tension she'd never heard before. "Ma'am, there's a Mr. Davenport here to see you. He's at the front gate. He's insistent." The name hit her like a physical shock, a jolt of ice water through her veins. "Connor, here!" Her hand flew to her throat, the primal instinct of a mother protecting her young surging through her. Her first thought was a panicked, visceral no. To have him thrown out, to call the police, to ensure his toxic presence never crossed the threshold of this safe haven. She imagined his shadow falling across the sunny floors, tainting the peace she had fought so hard to build. But then, as quickly as the panic came, it subsided, replaced by a cold, clear calm. Fear was what he had used to control her. Fear of his disapproval, fear of his anger, and finally fear of being left with nothing. She was not that woman anymore. She looked back at her son sleeping so peacefully and knew she could not live with a single lingering shadow of fear in their lives. This was a ghost that needed to be exorcised, not just locked outside the gate. This had to be the final, definitive end on her terms. "Let him in, Frank," she said, her voice astoundingly steady. "Show him to the living room. But stay in the hall. I want you close by." "Understood, ma'am." She took a deep, centering breath, walked out of the nursery, and softly closed the door. She moved through her home not with trepidation but with a sense of purpose. She was the mistress of this house. He was the intruder. The power dynamic had been irrevocably, fundamentally altered. She was standing by the fireplace when he walked in, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The man who entered the room was a stranger wearing Connor Davenport's face. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant, defeated shuffle. His expensive bespoke suits had been replaced by a rumpled blazer and trousers that seemed a size too big for his now gaunt frame. The healthy, confident glow of power had been replaced by a pasty, unhealthy pallor. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now bloodshot and haunted. He looked lost, a man completely untethered from the world he had once commanded. He stopped short when he saw her, his mouth parting slightly. He was taking in the woman she had become. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a strength he had never seen before, a strength he had never bothered to look for. "Audrey," he finally managed to say, his voice a dry rasp. "Connor," she replied. Her tone was not angry, not sad. It was cool, level, and utterly detached, as if addressing a former long-forgotten business acquaintance. She did not offer him a seat. She did not ask him if he wanted a drink. She offered him nothing. He took a shuffling step forward. I had to see you." His eyes darted around the room, taking in the comfortable elegance, the family photos on the mantelpiece, the evidence of a life that was thriving without him. A life that was thriving because he was not in it. And him. The baby. "I wanted to see my son. You lost that right when you had your pregnant wife thrown out onto the street," she said, her voice unwavering. Nicholas was not his son. He was her son. The distinction was critical. "Why are you really here, Connor?" His composure, fragile as it was, began to crumble. He wrung his hands, a nervous, desperate gesture so unlike the confident man who once gesticulated to command boardrooms. "I made a mistake. A terrible, catastrophic mistake. I was a fool. I was blinded by ambition, by arrogance." He looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Bianca." She meant nothing. "It was a power play, that's all. It was business. You have to believe me, it was never about her. It was always about the next step." Audrey listened, and what she felt was not anger but a profound, almost clinical pity. He still didn't get it. He was still framing his betrayal in the language of business, a bad deal, a miscalculation. He was incapable of understanding the human cost of his actions because to him people were never the point. "I don't have to believe anything you say ever again," she stated simply. It was a fact, plain and undeniable. "Please, Audrey?" he begged, his voice cracking. He took another step forward, desperation making him bold. "Your father. He destroyed me. He left me with nothing. I'm living in a rented room in Queens. I can't get a job. I can't even get a line of credit for a used car. The name Davenport is poison in this city. Every door is closed to me. I'm ruined." "You ruined yourself, Connor," she corrected him, her voice still unnervingly calm. My father simply held up a mirror. "He showed the world who you truly are, and this is the result. You built your life on a foundation of lies, and it collapsed. This is not his doing. This is yours. Every last bit of it." Tears thick and genuine welled in his eyes. But Audrey recognized them for what they were. Tears of self-pity, not remorse. He wasn't crying for what he did to her. He was crying for what he had lost. "Is there any chance?" he whispered, his voice thick with feigned hope. "For us. For the baby. I'm his father. I could be a good father. We could start over. We could leave New York, go somewhere no one knows us. I've learned my lesson, I swear it." It was that last part, the claim to fatherhood, the grotesque proposition of a new life built on the rubble of his destruction, that finally ignited the cold fire within her. She looked at this broken man and saw every cruel word, every calculated deception, every moment she had felt small and erased in his presence. She saw the text message from Bianca. She felt the cold November rain on her face. And she remembered the chilling discovery that he had been stealing from her almost from the day they were married. And then she looked past him through the open doorway and saw the closed door to the nursery where the most precious thing in her world was sleeping. She took a deliberate step toward him and he flinched back. The power had shifted so completely he was now afraid of her. "Let me be perfectly clear." She began, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that was far more terrifying than a shout. "So there is no possibility of a misunderstanding. There is no us. There will never be an us. There is no second chance. You are not a father to this child. You are a biological donor, a genetic footnote in his life story, nothing more. He will bear my name, the Harrington name, because it is a name of integrity, honor, and strength. Your name, the name you were so proud of, is a name of disgrace and failure. He will have none of it." She saw the words land like physical blows. His face went slack with shock. "You came into my life like a parasite?" She continued, her voice sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "You attached yourself to my family, to my name, and you tried to drain everything of value, my love, my trust, my family's reputation, my money. You saw me not as a wife or a partner, but as an asset to be leveraged and then discarded when a more profitable merger came along. But you made a fatal miscalculation. You underestimated me. You underestimated my father. And you grossly underestimated the consequences of your own boundless greed." She pointed a steady hand toward the front door. "Now you will leave my home. You will never contact me or my son again. You will not call, you will not write, and you will not show up here again. If you do, if you so much as walk down this street again, I will use every legal and financial resource my family possesses to obtain a restraining order so permanent and so far-reaching, you will not be permitted to live in the same state as us. Is that understood?" He stared at her, his mouth agape, speechless. The naive girl he had so easily manipulated was gone, burned away in the fire of his betrayal. In her place stood this formidable woman, a mother, a Harrington in spirit as much as in name. He had not just lost his fortune, he had lost the war completely and irrevocably. Without another word, a broken, hollowed-out shell of a man, he turned and walked out of the living room. Audrey stood her ground, listening to his footsteps in the hall, the quiet murmur of Frank's voice and the final definitive click of the front door closing. She did not move for a long time. There was no sense of triumph, no flush of victory. There was only a vast quiet and profound sense of peace. The storm was over. The ghost was gone. Slowly she turned and walked back to the nursery. She stood over the crib looking down at Nicholas, her heart swelling with a fierce, boundless love that was the most real thing in her life. Her past was a story of pain and betrayal, but her future was right here sleeping in a pool of afternoon sunlight. A future she had built for them from the ashes of a life that was never truly hers. A future that was real and strong and entirely beautifully her own. Audrey's story is a powerful reminder that the brightest futures can be born from the most devastating fires. She went from a billionaire's wife living a life of hollow luxury to a woman discarded and left with nothing. But in her darkest moment, she discovered a strength she never knew she had. She learned that true wealth isn't found in penthouse apartments or designer clothes, but in character integrity and the unbreakable bonds of family. Her journey from heartbreak to healing, from a pawn in a rich man's game to the queen of her own life, shows us that karma, when it arrives, can be as swift and decisive as a force of nature. She didn't just get her life back. She built a new one better and stronger than before, proving that the best revenge is not just living well but thriving on your own terms. What did you think of Connor's downfall? Was it the perfect karmic justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Audrey's incredible story of resilience, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more compelling stories of drama, revenge, and ultimate triumph, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.